Hello YouTube, how's everyone doing? It's Professional here. Welcome to my playthrough of Call of Duty World War II. I hope that you guys are enjoying this series. We're continuing from where we left off here, and we are on the final mission, the Rhine. So the story ends here, and I love the ending to this game, but the ending is also extremely sad. But we're going to be getting through it. We're going to be doing this on Harden, and I'm also going to talk a lot about the real history of this. But anyways, let's do it here.
March 1945. With the 9th Armored and the 99th, our mission is to take the bridge of Remagen. We get across, the last German resistance will crumble.
I want nothing more than to be with Hazel when our baby arrives. But I gotta convince Pearson to let me back in the fight. I'm doing it to find Zuss, cause he'd do the same for me. If I don't make it home, well, just watch over him, Paul.
Oh, what are you doing here?
What's it look like?
Suicide.
Hey, I wouldn't go in there. Pearson's been hitting the sauce.
Thanks for the warning.
You gotta be fucking kidding me.
I'm not giving up on Zussman.
Tell it to the chaplain, because I got no room for a second. Who can't follow orders?
You weren't following orders when you refused to abandon those boys at Kazarane.
What did you just say to me?
You heard me.
You better leave while you can still walk.
Davis told me. It wasn't your fault. You were only trying to do right by your platoon.
Get out! Get out!
I'm not going anywhere.
I said get out! God damn it! My orders were to fall back, but I just couldn't leave them. I told my men we were gonna hold this pass until reinforcements got here, but they never came. They never came. So I guess you're right. I did get my men killed. Now go.
Not.
So, let me basically explain what happened here. The Battle of Kasserine Pass was a real-life battle, and it was actually one of the last few battles of the North Africa campaign. It happened in around January, February 1943, I believe, and that pretty much at that point, the Allies had won the North Africa campaign. By early 1943, it was pretty much all was lost for the Germans in North Africa. And the Battle of Kasserine Pass has happened in modern-day Tunisia, and it was in Kasserine Pass. It's a pretty big pass through there, and what ended up happening is a lot of American soldiers actually got trapped in the pass, and they got ambushed by the Germans who were up in the hills. A lot of actually men ended up dying, and the story in Call of Duty World War II is that Pearson had some of his men that were actually trapped in the pass, and he wanted to go back for them. He was ordered to fall back, but he couldn't leave his men there, so he basically took a unit of his men and he went through the pass, tried to fight his way through to get his men, but what ended up happening is the men who were trapped in the pass ended up dying, and more men that he brought with him also ended up dying. And he was a captain or a lieutenant at that time, and what ended up happening was Turner was actually forced to demote him, so Turner was there as well. The British guy was also there, that guy from the French missions, he was also there during that incident, and that's basic. And what ended up happening after Pearson got demoted to sergeant, his entire personality changed, and he basically took this by the book, strict attitude where we're following orders no matter what. We're always following orders, because if we don't follow orders, then things are gonna go bad. But I don't, in my personal opinion, you let me know what you guys think in the comments. I don't think Pearson really did anything wrong. He was trying to do the right thing. He was trying to get his men out. He was trying to save them, and it just went really bad. And that's what Turner says when Turner says that when you're a commander, there's basically two choices you have: bad or worse. And so Turner didn't want to demote Pearson. He didn't blame Pearson for that also, for that situation that had happened. And the British guy earlier in the campaign, I don't think he blamed Pearson either. But now you're probably wondering, if that's what happened, why was there this story that Pearson was just, arrogant and he got his men killed? Because it was, like, very different from him. Like, the real story, what really happened is he tried to save his men, but more men ended up dying because he tried to save them. But then the story came up that he was being selfish, he was not following orders, being arrogant, trying to get glory for himself, and he got his men killed. So why did that story happen? The reason that story came up is because so many guys did not end up liking Pearson, and they didn't like his attitude, the personality that he developed afterwards. And so they basically, this fake story ended up getting created, that Pearson had intentionally, gotten his men killed because of his arrogance. But that's not really what had ended up happening.
Without my platoon. You think you got some guts, don't you? Try getting the job done day in and day out while your men are dying all around you.
Turner would have never given up like
Turner
this.
is dead.
Then make that mean something. No sacrifice too great.
You don't know anything about sacrifice.
How about this? Honorable discharge papers signed by Davies. My ticket home. I could have had everything. A hero's welcome, my girl in my arms. Hell, even a Bronze Star. But I got one last mission.
You must be crazy.
Crazy ain't the half of it.
All right, fall in.
Sergeant?
I said fall in, goddammit. If you want in, now's the time. Get the fuck out of my way.
I guess the gang's all here.
Not all of us. Let's take that bridge and find our boy.
Yes, Corporal.
If Zussman's alive, he's across that bridge. We just gotta take it first.
All right, there she is, the last bridge over the Rhine.
We get this convoy across, we're in the heartland. We'll bust them open. Look, it's all or nothing. It's all been leading to this. Hold on!
All right, on me, come on! We gotta secure the bridge entrance!
Yes, Sergeant. Come on.
Hey, don't make me regret giving you a second chance.
You know I won't. Let's move.
So, this is very much a real battle, and this battle, this is
Cover while we push to the bridge.
Remagen, Germany. Yep. So this battle, this is the bridge at Remagen, the Battle of Remagen, which is commonly called. And this battle, you've probably seen this battle in a lot of movies. There's actually a movie about this battle. The movie, I watched the movie a long time ago. I think it was made in like the 1960s. The movie that was made in the 1960s was kind of a bit inaccurate in how the weather was like very summer-like. Like it was like you had there was no snow really around. It was warmer weather. Where no, this was early in March. This was still pretty much winter where the battle ended up happening. But basically, the Rhine is a big river that goes through Germany, and I think it actually ends up going through a few other countries. But basically, if an invading army is going into Germany, they have to go across the Rhine, basically. If they're coming from the west, they have to go across the Rhine. And at this point, the Germans had pretty much knocked out most of the bridges that were actually over the Rhine. And the Rhine, the river itself, the water is actually very rough. And so the Germans were desperately trying to destroy this bridge. And what ended up happening is Hitler actually gave specific orders. A lot of the German commanders actually wanted to retreat across the bridge and actually hold the other side of the bridge. But Hitler basically said, no, you are going to hold on this side of the bridge here. And Hitler was ordering the commanders actually to retake all the land that was actually lost. So he was not only ordering them to be at the front of the bridge, but he was also ordering them to do an offensive. And this just shows you what a madman Hitler was, is that Hitler was extremely evil, but he had basic no knowledge of, military tactics, nothing like that. To him, it was just, basically a map and a piece of paper. He didn't seem to understand that Germany had pretty much used all of its fuel supply at this point. They were running low on resources. They had very little ammunition, very little guns, and not only that, they lost all their best soldiers at this point. Is the vast majority of the soldiers at this point, most of them were actually Volkssturm, which were basically civilians who were drafted into the Nazis' army. So it was October 1944 is they made a civilian conscript army. And this civilian army, it was supposed to raise, I think, like 5 million soldiers, but I think in reality, it raised like around 1 million soldiers. And these soldiers were basically old men who were too old to fight. They were even kids, Hitler Youth, women, and also people that were injured, people for example who maybe lost an arm or a leg. They could even be drafted into the Volkssturm. So basically you had a force of old men, kids, and also people that were suffered tremendous injuries from the war that technically shouldn't be fighting anymore. But so a lot of these soldiers, they were not trained. These guys were not trained. These were kids and old men. A lot of these guys were fighting. There was some SS at Remagen, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, but at this point in the war, huge amounts of these soldiers that both the Americans and the Soviets were fighting were Volkssturm forces. And the Volkssturm were actually trained heavily as the Panzerfaust, that kind of like German RPG. It looks like kind of like an RPG, but it was before the RPG. And that using the Panzerfaust was a very effective weapon against tanks, but you have to be extremely close. And using a weapon like that, puts those guys at a great disadvantage. So basically the point that I'm getting at is that Hitler did not seem to understand the type of force that he had, and in his mind, it was, if he had like 80,000 men, he thought that 80,000 men was like this well-trained, well-equipped force, when in reality it wasn't. It was a lot of conscripts. They didn't have the proper equipment, and the Americans had tons of air and also tank support, which the Germans did not have a lot at this point. So pretty much the Germans were going to lose the war. There was really nothing they could have done. And also about the bridge is actually called the Ludendorff Bridge, who is named after General Ludendorff, who is a famous German World War I general. So a lot of people call it the Remagen Bridge, but it was actually called the Ludendorff Bridge. And this battle you see in a lot of Call of Duty games. I think it's the final battle in Call of Duty Finest Hour. In Call of Duty Finest Hour is the final mission. It's also in Hell Let Loose. But yeah, that's they're going to be crossing the bridge, and the Americans actually do end up taking the bridge. And when the bridge actually got taken, Hitler got so angry that he actually ordered V2 rockets to actually be fired at the bridge. And that was the first time that V2 rockets were actually used on German soil, because whenever the Germans would fire V2 rockets, they would fire them in like Britain, Belgium, France, but they never typically fired them in German soil. But that was the first time that it was fired at German soil, and the V2 rockets largely missed the bridge. They didn't hit the bridge. They ended up hitting like a bar where a few American soldiers were, and it killed them. And then one hit like a small town in Germany, killing a bunch of civilians. But that's there was also a lot of planes that were crossing, and the planes were trying to desperately to destroy the bridge. The bridge actually ended up collapsing, but by the time the bridge collapsed, the Americans had actually already crossed, and they had actually built their own bridge. So it was they weren't able to destroy the bridge in time. I think that the German commander that was in charge of actually setting the demolition charges for the bridge, I think he was executed. Correct me if I'm wrong on that too. But yeah, the Bridge of Remagen, I will say, the Battle of Remagen is one of the, best, Allied victories of World War II. That the U.S. was able to take the bridge. And I would also say it's, one of the most heroic battles, too, that they managed to cross that bridge. I think they crossed the bridge in a day, too. That they managed to actually cross this fortified bridge and actually take it. Just imagine what those guys must have gone through. Oh, damn, okay. is. Okay. I forgot how difficult this first part is. Like, trying to actually cross the bridge at this first part is like the worst. Like, actually trying to get on the bridge. Try to get Pearson's ability here. More shots here. One more shot left, gonna make it count. Okay, there we go. And also another thing that I'll say about this is this is very realistic for what the terrain looks like at Remagen and the area.
Sergeant, call him out.
Crop position spotted. Check your vision. Enemies. Moving to the tower. We need to clear those MGs.
The Battle of Remagen is a perfect mission to be the final mission in a World War II game.
Get to the bridge! Daniels, Aiello, secure the upper floors. On the stairs! Let's go!
Checking to see if I got any med kits. Okay. Oh, perfect right here. Okay.
Daniels, I got your back. Clear the top floor.
Oh, a memento. Okay.
Daniels, you get up the artillery. Zero in.
Grenade! We're all clear.
This is a Panzerfaust right here. What I was talking about, those rockets earlier.
me. We're heading on to the bridge.
Kann meine Beine nicht bewegen. Amerikaner, ich flehe euch an.
Crowds are gonna blow the bridge. We gotta stop them. Styles, what do you got?
They're rolling out everything.
Just buy some time. We'll handle the charges.
All right, I'll lead the way while Daniels and Styles cover the engineers. Ready? Come on, let's go.
You two, defuse the charges below the main structure.
Crowds are falling back. Stay low and keep sharp.
Yeah, so this is actually true, is they were actually trying to arm the bridge and they were trying to blow it up. And this is during the battle itself, they were trying to arm the bridge too, while they were crossing.
On your shot, Dave.
Yes, yep. Dynamite. But, like, imagine what it must have been like trying to cross this bridge. This, like, trying to cross something like this, like you're coming straight towards them. You have to crawl through this, like, little narrow pass. Makes you extremely exposed.
They're blowing the bridge! Who's down? Who's still with me?
Bridge held. The damn thing held.
Oh, men were still on it.
There were so many attempts to blow up the bridge, and it failed. But then the bridge collapsed after the U.S. crossed. It was... Oh, crap. And yes, for people wondering, the Germans did actually detonate charges when their own men were still crossing. Stuka planes.
We gotta get off this thing. Near the barrel. Yo, Daniel! Why don't you signal the artillery?
Toss me that target and smoke.
Here, catch!
This actually might not be a good idea, calling in mortars in the bridge, but it's Call of Duty logic. Need a little bit more for Pearson's ability. I'll actually be able to see even through smoke. That's a Stuka right there.
him out, Sergeant!
Barricade is barricaded!
Daniels, clear out the rest of the tower! Daniels, get up there now!
Smoke, Daniel!
Oh, that's another memento. Okay.
Grenade out!
You can signal for more!
That's everyone!
Yeah, this guy's SS here. Found all the mementos. Okay.
Those planes are gonna take out the bridge. We need to capture those AA guns. Daniels, Howard, on me. Move now! Start this suppressive fire now! Get to those trenches! Move!
Throw me a targeted smoke!
Ready to go! Get your ass over here, Daniels! You need to capture those AA guns!
Next to the crates!
Oh, and this part, let me also lower it a little bit too. Oh, I guess there's no difference between game volume and music. Okay, because you can hear the Call of Duty World War II theme playing on this part.
Daniels, get to the AA gun!
Enemy at the sandbag! Daniels! Man that AA gun!
The Stukas are German attack planes. They're trying to bring down the bridge.
Turn left! Keep on him! Direct hit! Nice, Daniels! On the left! Up top! They've sighted you, Daniels! He's going down! 12 o'clock! Nice, Daniels! Left! Got him! Order! All five boys are here! They're gonna hit us with everything.
Not done yet! On me! Crowd position, fire!
Pearson. Okay.
Call him out! I need target and smoke ILO.
They're backing into the tunnel! Move, move, move! Move!
Enemy spotted! They're coming out!
Everyone stand down! Stand down!
They're surrendering!
It's over. It's over.
The bridge is ours. Corporal Howard. I believe I owe you an apology. You owe me a hell of a lot more than that. Come on through. Just made history, fellas. First across the Rhine. What you looking at, Fritz?
There are reports of POW camps in the area. Davis has ordered us to wait for authorization before conducting a sweep. But I guess you know what to do with Davis's orders.
Copy that, Sergeant.
All right.
Proud our platoon held the first bridgehead on the Rhine. Now our convoy's rolling into the heart of Germany. They say war's as good as won. Not to me. Not while Zuss is out there.
After leaving
So,
the bridge on our mission east, we searched camps along the way. I thought I knew what cruelty was. I didn't know anything. But one thing's for certain. What I saw will stay with me forever. The survivors said that the other POWs, including Zussman, had been taken to a smaller camp 3 hours east. All I could do was hope he somehow made it.
Last one. It's more like a labor camp. Come on.
So about this is
Feeling it's deserted.
I actually did not know this, but this specific camp that you actually see in Call of Duty World War II, this was actually a real concentration camp. This was the Berga concentration camp. This was located near the small town of Berga. And the thing about this concentration camp is the vast majority of the prisoners in this concentration camp were actually American prisoners of war. A lot of them that were actually taken after the Battle of the Bulge. So this was not just some work camp, this was an extermination camp as well. This, a lot of the prisoners that were taken after the Battle of the Bulge, they were taken to a Stalag camp in central Germany, and the Stalag camps were basically prisoner of war camps. I forget the name of the specific Stalag camp that they were taken to, but basically the Berga concentration camp is they wanted to use slave labor here. And what happened was they were separating the American prisoners of war. They were separating them by race, and they were separating them by religion. And they were trying to find the SS were trying to find the Jewish American POWs. And what ended up happening is a lot of the officers actually refused to allow their men to be separated. So a lot of the soldiers, they stayed with their Jewish comrades. They would not let them get taken away. They wanted to be taken too, so they weren't going to leave their men. So if you were a Jewish prisoner of war, a Jewish American prisoner of war, you'd be taken to this camp. But also, if you said anything against the SS, if you talked back to them, they didn't like you, they would send you immediately to this camp as well. So there was in total over 300 American prisoners of war that was in this concentration camp. And also Metz, the guy that you're actually going to see at the end of this mission, and the guy that actually executed that American prisoner of war and actually beat up Zussman, Metz was actually a real guy, and he was actually a Nazi SS official sergeant. He was a sergeant that actually helped run this camp. And I'm actually going to talk about what happened to Metz afterwards, but this camp, what they were basically doing is they were forcing the prisoners to build underground tunnels, basically ammunition factory that was supposed to be underground. And the prisoners were basically worked to death. They were barely given any food. They were worked all long hours, and this is in the cold. These guys were taken after the Battle of the Bulge, which was Battle of the Bulge ended pretty much at the beginning of January, and so a lot of these guys were transferred around into this area around February 1945, where it was still really cold. So these guys were working outside, really cold, barely any food, and they were just constantly digging, shoveling. What Metz, the real life Metz, what he did was one of the Americans.
There's a barracks over there.
One of the Jewish American POWs actually tried to escape, and what happened was Metz captured him, brought him to the center of camp, and executed him in the head with his handgun, like you saw in the Call of Duty World War II cutscene. But in real life, it was that he literally brought him in the center of the camp and just executed for everyone to see. And then what ended up happening is that guy's body, the SS basically just lit up his body, just sprayed his body, just with automatic fire after that. I think they used MP40s. And that prisoner of war, Metz, left that dead body there in the center of camp. And he left that dead body there for days, just for everybody to basically look at it while they were crossing by. Everybody in the camp hated Metz. They considered him, pure evil, which is what he was. Also, Metz, what he also did is the Red Cross actually sent supplies to this camp, because the Red Cross thought that this was, at first the Red Cross thought that this was a regular POW camp, which is what the Germans were saying. They were saying that this was a regular POW camp. They were telling the Red Cross that we're treating everybody here humanely, and the Red Cross ended up sending a lot of supplies, medical supplies, food for the American prisoners. And what Metz did was he told the prisoners that you can only have rations from the Red Cross if you're cleaned. And a lot of the prisoners, they were dirty because they were working constantly in the mines, building this underground weapons factory. There's no way for them to clean themselves. And Metz basically said, oh, because you're not clean, you're not getting any rations. And what he did was he stole all the rations, these Red Cross rations that were supposed to be for the soldiers, and he gave it to his men, the SS. And he starved out the prisoners. And the prisoner, if you want to know the average weight of an American prisoner in this camp, was 80 pounds. That is literally what the average weight of an American prisoner was in this camp. So Metz was a complete bastard, a complete evil human being, just literally a complete piece of shit. So literally what he did in real life was even worse than what you actually see in the game. He was just horrible, horrible human being. I didn't even know that Metz was a real person. I thought that he was just a fictional character created for Call of Duty World War II, but no, he was very much a real person. And if you want to know, out of the 300, it was like 350 American prisoners of war that were actually sent to this camp. How many ended up dying? Over 100. It was somewhere over 100 that ended up dying. And what ended up happening is the remaining prisoners were actually taken on the death march. So as the Americans were actually approaching the camp, Metz actually took them through the woods and was marching them just like you're about to see. And another 36 actually died during the death march. They weren't properly clothed. A lot of them died from starvation. They collapsed, or the SS had murdered them along the way.
These were our guys.
Take out your camera. The world's gotta know.
And this is also extremely important. I think this is a reference to Eisenhower's line, because when the concentration camps were first found by Americans, when they were
They had them living worse than animals. From the looks of it, they were beaten, starved, and worked to the bone.
when the Americans were finding the concentration camps, what happened was Dwight D. Eisenhower, he said a famous line, and in his famous line he said, get the evidence, take the pictures, get as much evidence as you can, record this. Because Eisenhower said, if we don't capture this now, we're gonna have idiots that are gonna end up denying this later on. And that's exactly what happened, is you have people to this day that actually still deny the Holocaust. And this is, I honestly cannot believe that people still do that to this day. I think it's like, there are so many, if you notice, a lot of these people, a lot of these Holocaust deniers, what you notice about them is these are oftentimes young people that are brainwashed into this extremist Nazi ideology. They're brainwashed into this, they hang out with just, really bad people, they start believing this crap, it's constantly fed to them, and so you look at just the people they hang around, and they develop basically this extreme ideology. And a lot of these, neo-Nazis today, the people that deny the Holocaust, a lot of these, the younger people, you can still save them. You can still, convince them that they're wrong. You can get them out of that ideology, get them to change. But once they are older, when somebody's like a neo-Nazi and they are older, we're talking late 30s, 40s, there's pretty much almost no changing them. There's no way that they are going to change their views. There's no way they're going to change their mindset. But there are still, horrible people to this day that still deny the Holocaust. But the point that I'm getting as these young people that deny the Holocaust, the young neo-Nazis, is you can still get them to change a lot of them. You can get them to get away from that extremist ideology. But the older people is they are not going to change. They are not going to change their thinking whatsoever. And I remember there was a TV show that was in the 1990s. And basically, on that TV show, there was these, skinhead neo-Nazis, and they were just saying these really horrible, racist, offensive things to this, to the black host. I would have to look up exactly what the TV show was, but this was a long time ago. And what ended up happening is then, those same, neo-Nazis were brought on the show, years and years and years later. And when those guys actually started reading about, what the Nazis actually did during World War II, those guys were just, crying and apologizing to the host. So years later, they went on the show, those same guys, and they were just apologizing on TV just for, basically the horrible, offensive things that they had said.
The Nazis had murdered our boys in cold blood, and no fire in hell could burn away the stain.
I'm guessing they made an example out of them.
It was over 100 American prisoners of war actually died in this camp. And I actually read one article that said that it was 5% of all American prisoners of war that were actually murdered in this camp specifically. So just imagine that 5% of all, American prisoners that died specifically in this one camp alone. It's my God. It's this, you wonder how people can just be so cruel, how people can just do such horrible things. It's just, and I will say though that when the Nazis were actually a lot of the Nazis when they were actually tried after World War II, their defense typically they typically didn't deny what they did. What they instead did was they either downplayed the extent of what they did, or they said that they were following orders. They said that they were following orders, and that's basically where that that line comes from. You know, following orders. It was basically what the Nazis had said after World War II. That's not an excuse. Doesn't matter if you were following orders or not. There's plenty of people disobeyed, you know, bad, evil orders, even putting their lives on the line to disobey those orders. So literally, there is no excuse saying they were following orders and they had to do something like this. Like, you know, I could never do something like this. I'd rather die myself than, you know, engage in something like this. Like, I couldn't live with myself doing something like this. So that was literally just an excuse that they had used, because they said it was just, oh, we were just following orders, we had no choice. They didn't just follow orders. They believed in the orders as well. They were, you know, these guys were guilty as sin. So literally, and basically at Nuremberg, they said that's not an excuse. It is not an excuse, because then pretty much every single war criminal is going to, if they, and that's why that case was really important in Nuremberg. It was really important, and it set case precedents for future war crimes. Because basically, if the Nuremberg trials had declared a lot of these Nazi officials innocent and said that they were just following orders, what that would have done is every single war criminal from every single war thereon afterwards would have just said, we were just following orders. You know, we had no choice. We were just following orders. So Nuremberg set that precedent that is not to be used as an excuse. The Japanese, on the other hand, the Japanese officials, they had their own version of Nuremberg. It was actually called the Tokyo War Tribunals. The Japanese were a bit different during their trials, where the Germans, they either tried to downplay, the extent of their atrocities, or what they would do is they would say that they were following orders. The Japanese, on the other hand, a lot of the generals, what they would do is they would claim specifically that I didn't give any specific orders for my men to do anything, but my men did it anyway. So that's what the Japanese generals were saying. They were saying, you know, I didn't give orders to murder anybody. My soldiers just did that. That was basically their excuse. But here's the thing: is rule number one in the military chain of command is you are responsible for what your men do. So if you're a commanding officer and your men do something horrible, they do an atrocity, and you don't punish them for that, you don't do something about that, you are just as guilty as them, because you are enabling that action. But I will say, and before we move on to the final part here, is talking a little bit about denazification. And I think I'm gonna make I want to make like a lore video talking about this camp specifically and like the real life Mets. About denazification is. Denazification, you can make the argument that it kind of failed, because denazification was the American policy to basically denazify Germany. It was to get Nazi ideology out of the people's heads. It had some success, but largely a lot of people say that it failed, and the U.S. actually canceled it in 1951. So that was when the Cold War was happening, and the U.S. was rebuilding West Germany, and they basically, a lot of these, former Nazi officials actually ended up becoming leaders in West Germany. They actually ended up getting top positions in the West German government, sometimes even in the military in the West German government as well. Even Nazi rocket scientists who developed the V2 rockets. The V2 rockets were designed specifically as a terror weapon. So they weren't designed as just to target military. They were designed to target civilians. That's what a lot of people don't know about the V2s. The V2s were designed primarily to target civilians, because look at what the V2s did. The V2s primarily bombed civilian areas. It was a terror weapon. It was meant to kill so many civilians that the Allies would just not want to fight anymore. That was the whole purpose of the design of the V2 rocket. And a lot of the V2 rocket scientists who developed these horrible weapons ended up becoming, NASA scientists. So they ended up forming a lot of NASA. And I will say is both the U.S. and the Soviet Union had their own version of denazification in East and West Germany. And I would say that both of them failed. What the U.S. did when their version of denazification is they went after the ideology primarily. And one of the most effective things the U.S. did in denazification is that the U.S. actually took a lot of the civilians from like German towns, and they brought them by force to concentration camps, and they showed them the bodies, and they forced them to move the bodies. If you actually watch Band of Brothers, there's a scene in Band of Brothers where they actually do just that, and that is and that might seem cruel, but it was necessary. They had to do that because they had to show the German public, this is what your government did, this is what your leader did. They did these horrible atrocities, because if they didn't show the people firsthand, then if the people saw it in newspapers, they saw pictures of it, they saw videos, a lot of people would just say, oh, that's just Allied propaganda, they're just trying to smear Hitler, but showing people themselves the camp, where people would see the camp, and they would see, the murders, the victims of just what their government basically did to people. And I will say, though, is that when you hear that argument where a lot of people say that they say that the German public didn't know about the Holocaust, that's not entirely true, because I see like a lot of comments online where people say, oh, the average German didn't know that the Holocaust was going on. Well, I would argue with that point, and I would say that the average German probably had a good idea that something was going on. They might not have had they might not have had known how big the genocide was, but they had to have known that some kind of massacres were happening, some kind of mass killings were happening, because millions of people were being taken by force and taken away. Millions of people were being taken away. People were being rounded up, and they were being taken away, and maybe the civilians, the public in Germany didn't know directly where the camps were, but when you saw your government, the Nazi German government, had basically for years had basically said that Jews, Slavs, gay people, handicapped people, Roma people, that they were inferior to the Aryan race. That's basically what the German government had been saying for years and years and years. This is even before World War II had started. They would say the same thing, that all of these races are inferior to the Aryan race. And when you see all these people being taken away, you don't have to be a genius to figure out that they're killing them. They're mass murdering them. So when you hear a lot of people say, oh, the German public didn't know, about the Holocaust, they might not have known the extent of what it was happening, but they had to have known that something was going on. And also, people that lived in a town like Berga, like where this camp is, the people that live in Berga definitely would have known that something was going on, because of the smell of all the dead bodies that's going across. They would have to have known that something was going on. So when you hear people say, oh, the public in Germany didn't know that this was going on, they didn't know about these atrocities, like I said, they might not have known the scale that it was happening on, but they definitely knew that something was going on. So it was, like I said, is you can see that millions of people were being taken away. The German government was basically saying these people were inferior. And not only that, the German government had basically invaded, pretty much every single European country. So literally, I don't buy it when people say that, that the German public largely was unaware. Is maybe not every single person knew, but people had to have some kind of idea that something was going on. As for the denazification, what I'll say about it is the reason that it ultimately failed is because the U.S. canceled it too early. That's what it was. 1951, the U.S. canceled it too early. And the West German government was extremely corrupt in this time. Very, very corrupt. What the West German government was doing is a lot of the people in the West German government were extremely sympathetic to a lot of these former Nazi war criminals. And you know this because what happened was a lot of these people that were actually sentenced to life in prison, or they were sentenced to death. What the West German government would do is they would commute their sentence, and what they would do is they would use technicalities. They would basically say, oh, this person had, gotten out, or is getting out because, they're in poor health. They're gonna die, they're sick, they're old, and then they would live for another 20 years, and they would just release them. Or they would say, oh, they have good behavior, they're reformed, they're not a Nazi anymore, and they would just release them, even if they've committed atrocities. And I will tell you this, is if a Nazi war criminal is in ill health, like, they're dying, they're sick, I don't care. I don't care if, if a Nazi war criminal is dying or is sick in prison. That's no reason to let them out, because they had sick and dying people in these camps, and they didn't do anything to help them whatsoever. So why should we release some, Nazi official that's, dying and, sick in prison? That's one of the stupidest things that I've ever heard, but that's basically what the West German government was saying. Oh, we gotta release these guys because, they're old and they're dying in prison. So a lot of these guys ended up getting released. And there's actually one guy, his name is actually Heinz Reinfarth. I'll actually have a picture of him up on the screen right now. Heinz Reinfarth is literally, people in Poland see him as the devil, which is what he is basically. This guy had killed thousands of civilians during the Warsaw Uprising in 1944. His SS unit would round people up on the street and just execute them en masse. If a Polish resistance fighter killed a German soldier, Reinfarth's men would take 100 Polish people and execute them for one German soldier that was killed. That is basically what Reinfarth did. And what ended up happening to him after World War II? Nothing. He faced no consequences, nothing. He was not prosecuted for the atrocities that he had committed. He basically got away with it. And Poland had wanted him extradited for years and years and years. And not only was he never extradited, he actually became very rich. He became a top lawyer in Germany. He became a multimillionaire. He bought a mansion, and he also got elected. He got elected mayor of the town that he was living in Germany. So imagine this guy killed thousands of people and, slaughtered people so brutally. And this guy never would, and the West German government would say constantly, "Oh, there's no evidence that he was involved in any war crimes in Poland." That's what the West German government would say for years. And then in 2014, it was 2014 when the German government actually apologized for it. So it was, so many years later after the war, only 10 years ago. But they apologized to Poland over Rhine that they never extradited him. And as for denazification in East Germany, when it comes to the Soviet occupation zones, the Soviets were a lot more strict towards a lot of these Nazi officials. They actually had them hanged, they had them killed. But the Americans were. I would say the Americans were too lenient in a lot of times too, that they didn't, the American government should have controlled the West German government more, and they should have stopped the West German government from releasing a lot of these Nazis. The Soviets, on the other hand, the Soviets did kill a lot of these Nazis, which was good, but one mistake that the Soviets did is that the Soviets would send thousands of Germans to Gulag camps in Siberia, communist work camps. And a lot of the Germans that were sent to these camps actually had nothing to do with Nazis. So basically, if you were like an old man that was like drafted into the Volkssturm, which was basically like the like I said, the civilian militia in the Nazi army. If you were drafted into that, like the last few weeks of World War II, and you were captured by the Soviets, there's a chance that you could be sent to a Gulag camp. So you could be like an old man that really didn't do anything wrong. You were just forcibly conscripted in the last few years of the war. You didn't serve in the SS, you didn't serve in the Wehrmacht, you were just in the Volkssturm, and you could have just been sent to the to a gulag. And the same thing could happen to Hitler Youth, like kids that were like drafted into the German army, like the last few weeks of World War II. They could actually end up getting sent to gulags too by the Soviets. So that's what I say is the Soviets also, while the Soviets did punish a lot of Nazi officials, they did kill them. They also sent thousands of people that were just regular conscripts to gulags that really had no that really did not commit any kind of war crimes. They were just basically draftees in the final weeks of World War II.
They'd slaughtered the weakest, anyone that was slowing them down.
Daniels, over here. Daniels, you gotta see this. Tracks lead to the fields. That's where they must have marched them.
And that's where we're going.
I wouldn't get your hopes up, Corporal.
I made a promise to Zussman.
We'll find him. I just can't guarantee we'll find him alive.
So now this is the part where I'm going to talk about Metz. You guys are probably wondering what happened to Metz, what ends up happening to him. So, like I said, Metz took the American prisoners of war, and he sent them on this death march. And he actually marched them out April 4th, 1945, the exact same date that this is actually going on. Metz actually marched those soldiers on a death march. Over, 36 soldiers actually died during the death march, and the Americans were actually pursuing. They were trying to catch up to him. But the thing about this is that the American army did not catch up to the death march until like April 20-something. So in this game, you see they catch up to Metz like April 4th, but in real life, they caught up to them like April 20th. But anyways, let's do the final part here.
Red, take the shot!
Everything's coming full circle. All I've done, all I wish I'd done. It's like my whole life is leading to this moment.
We need to head home, baby brother.
Paul!
So his brother died, and Daniels
died right there in the
feels
snow.
like he failed him.
All because I couldn't. Damn it. I'm coming, Zussman. You're not gonna die, brother. Not now. Not today.
Zussman! Zussman!
Take the shot! Take the shot!
Is it over? You must be dreaming.
What'd they do?
Thought you were left behind. And I'm gonna die alone out here.
Drink some. Easy now.
Okay, come on, let's get on here. Into the Jeep, come on. General.
You always looked out for me, Paul. And I reckon you did today. Because there's only one thing that keeps you going on that long march. And that's having your brothers beside you.
When history called, you answered. From all walks of life, you came to defend peace and freedom. I thank you, and the world thanks you. Wherever your path takes you, know this. You will always be amongst a brotherhood of heroes.
Well, this is it, fellas. Zussman wanted you to have it. Yeah, you'll need it more than me. You got a kiddo now.
Thanks for the vote of confidence.
Yeah, you'll be fine. Gentlemen. Queens! Your prodigal son returns!
You gonna be okay?
Gotta say bye to Zussman. Sarge.
Going home, Sergeant?
I am home. What about you? You gonna re-up?
I've been away from Texas for a long time.
You take care, farm boy.
I will. When my son asks what I did, I'll tell him I fought with the first. And that crazy bastard Pearson.
Crazy ain't the half of it.
If you're ever in Chicago,
I'll get there.
oh, yeah, maybe I'll surprise you in Longview first.
You're welcome anytime.
You know, when they captured us, it wasn't just our freedom that they took. Even though we were together, and we were alone, looking for any way to survive. But you could have gone home a hero. Why'd you come back?
I saw that life. Just couldn't live it. To the end.
To the end.
The dream was different last night. This time we made it home, together. I can still hear the wolves' paw. Sometimes I still see them coming. But you showed me how to fight them. So this belongs to you. Because the sacrifice you made taught me that a hero will risk it all to save his brother. And you'll always be both to me.
So that's the ending there. One of the best World War II games that I've played, and one of the best, stories that I've played too. The multiplayer in this game, not that great, but the story in this game is absolutely amazing. We're talking like Band of Brothers like story. So like the story in this game was absolutely excellent, and I don't know like what the developers were like thinking by doing Vanguard, where Vanguard was such a messy, unrealistic story, where the story in this game was much more realistic and much more believable. But what I think they should have done is they should have just done, when they were making Vanguard, they should have just made Vanguard a Pacific game. That's what they should have done. Like, the entire game should have just been the Pacific. And it should have been, It should have been focusing how this game was focused on the Western Front of World War II. That one should have been just an entire Pacific-like storyline, just like this. Or what they could have done is they could have done a Korean War game, and they could have done the Korean War game with Pearson, because I could imagine Pearson would probably fight in Korea. I could imagine he probably would, you know. So I would love to see these characters come back, but like, you know, do a storyline with Pearson. But let me talk a little bit about Metz and what ended up happening in real life. So in the game, you know, you catch up to Metz and you shoot him before he's about to execute Zussman. And this is the thing, I don't want to piss people off, but I'm going to tell you guys, the real ending was actually not good. What ended up happening in real life with Metz is Metz actually deserted through the Death March. So through the Death March, he realized that the Americans were eventually going to catch up to him, and what he did was he ran away. And he got on a bicycle and he got away. And what ended up happening is later on, he actually ended up getting captured. But even though he actually ended up getting captured, the U.S. Army actually dropped all charges against him in 1948. And he was released. And he was free to go. And people watching this video were like thinking like, what? Why? Like, you know, after he, you know, starved out soldiers, he executed soldiers, he did such horrible things. According to reports that we have from the U.S. military at that time, they said that he was cruel, but that there wasn't evidence that he directly engaged in war crimes when there was. There was several American survivors from that camp that literally wanted to testify to watching him murder people. When he murdered that one soldier, he shot that one soldier in the head, there were soldiers who wanted to testify to that, but they were denied. They were never allowed to testify during the trial. And so, literally, his entire trial was based on just witness testimony of witnesses that were not even present at the trial. And that helped his defense out greatly, that the survivors weren't able to testify directly at him. And Metz was such a cruel person that when he was actually confronted and he was asked, you know, why soldiers actually starved to death, why soldiers died from disease in your camp, Metz basically said that was on the American medics. He said the American medics should have been taking care of them. When he literally stole their rations that was from the Red Cross, that was meant to be for the soldiers. He stole their rations, starved them to death, you know, tortured them, killed them, and he's saying, oh, it's, you know, their fault because their medics didn't take care of them. What a sick bastard. A disgusting human being. And he was released, and I don't know what happened to him afterwards. I don't know. So in real life, he wasn't shot like this part. He did lead them on the death march, but they didn't catch up to him and shoot him like you have here. So in real life, he got away with it. That's the horrible thing about it. The camp commander, the camp commander who ran that concentration camp, because Metz was the sergeant, he was in charge of the work details, but the commander that was primarily running the camp, he was actually caught by the Soviets and executed. So the camp commander of Berga was killed, executed, but Metz got away with it. Metz never faced any kind of prosecution. And a lot of people say the reason that the U.S. military dropped its charges against Metz is because they believed that he was going to re-enlist in the new West German army, because they were the U.S. military at that time. They wanted to rebuild the West German military, and so what they did was they took a lot of former Nazi officials and they actually were using them to rebuild the West German military, and that's one of the reasons the denazification did not go far enough. So honestly, is a lot of the people, a lot of these guys should have been, you know, punished. A lot of these guys should have been executed. A lot of these guys should have been hanged. But a lot of people were not, you know, fully punished for a variety of reasons. They weren't punished because the U.S. wanted to rebuild the West German military, because they were scared of, you know, the Soviet Union at that time, and also because the West German government was corrupt, and they were, you know, releasing a lot of these guys on good behavior, and they were releasing them claiming that they were sick, you know, early on. And I would say that Germany fully became denazified, I would say probably in the 70s or the 80s. Like, by the time of the 60s, the majority of the German public did not have Nazi views in, like, the 60s, but there was still a huge, there was a huge amount of people that still had those views. They still had those extreme views. And there was actually polls that were actually taken of the German public right after World War II. And basically, the polls were saying that it was like 25 to 30% of the German public basically believed that Hitler was a good leader and Hitler had good ideas. You know, now in Germany, the number is probably going to be under 1%. But like, back then it was like, it was like 30%, like around there. That's scary that 30% of the German public still, and this was going even in the 50s. Even in the 50s, there was like 30% of the German public polled, still believed that like Hitler was, Hitler was a good leader. I'm not attacking, Germans today, but I'm saying is that Germany had a serious, Nazi problem, and it wasn't, fully gone until like, the 70s and the 80s. That's, and at that time, the reason that Germany became really denazified in the 70s and 80s, the reason for that is because a lot of people had been born in Germany that were not alive during World War II, and so the kids had a lot different ideas than their parents. The kids would what the young people would do is they would actually start doing research. They would start reading more about World War II. They would read about their history. They would read about what their leader did, and then the young people basically pressured the German government and said that enough of this is like, we have to clean this up. We have to get rid of this. And so what ended up happening at that point is Germany, the Germany that we have today came from that. It came from that second generation of, kids that were born, and they basically started questioning their elders, and asking them what they did, why their government did these horrible things. And that's why you had all of these policies put in Germany, and that's why Germany takes its education very seriously in regards to World War II. And here's the thing about this is Germany is actually one of the few countries in the world to this day that takes full responsibility for its dark past. It is in Germany, it's also illegal to deny the Holocaust. So Germany is one of those few countries in the world today that actually takes responsibility for its dark deeds. There are a lot of people, on behalf of everyone, Sledgehammer, our heartfelt thanks. This game is dedicated to men and women who served and sacrificed in service of their countries during World War II. I love that final line. And I wanted to talk more about the Holocaust denial. Do you know there is actually three main reasons why people deny genocide. 3 reasons. Ever since I could hold a rifle, I wanted to be like you, Paul. You showed me it's about fighting for the buddy next to you, and if you're lucky, surviving with your soul intact. That's it. We've completed the campaign. So what I was talking about genocide denial is there are 3 reasons all across the world on why people deny genocide. The 3 reasons are, the first reason is ideology. Is when people have the same ideology as the people who committed the genocide, they're going to deny the genocide, because they don't want their ideology to look bad, and they don't want basically they're trying to paint their ideology in the best light possible. That's why neo-Nazis deny the Holocaust, is because they're trying to, paint Nazism as some kind of good thing, as some kind of moral thing, when it was, horrible. Nazism is literally the worst form of government. It's even worse than communism. Communism is really bad too, but Nazism is the worst, because Nazism is literally gonna target people, specifically on their race, on their religion. So it literally, for me, Nazism is literally the worst form of government. It's even worse than, even Hitler's rule is even worse than Stalin's rule, in my opinion. But basically, that's the 3 reasons are they deny genocide because of ideology. So look, it's like, who's denying the Holocaust? If you look at the people who are denying the Holocaust, it's almost always neo-Nazis, almost always Nazi sympathizers. It's almost always the people who are denying the Holocaust is Nazi sympathizers. And then if you look at the people who are denying like communist atrocities, if you look at the people that deny like the Holodomor, where the Soviets had killed like millions of Ukrainians. If you look at like people who deny like the Great Leap Forward, where like Mao Zedong had like led to millions of deaths of starvation in China. If you look at the people who are denying those like communist atrocities, who are denying the communist atrocities most of the time? It is communists. Also because they're trying to portray communism in a good light. And so they're basically creating conspiracy theories. They're lying about history to try to make their ideology look better. And the other 2 reasons why people deny genocide is pride and shame, and they both go in together. And it's basically is you have these really toxic people, all over the world, that they love their country, and they love their country to an extreme point. There's nothing wrong with loving your country, But when you love your country so much to the point where you are going to make excuses for every single bad thing that your country has done in its history, and you can't admit to one bad thing that your country has done, that is extremely bad at that point. That's going off the rails at that point. That is it. And that's basically why, that's the main reason why people deny all these other genocides across the world. The first one, like I said, is ideology, but the second one is pride and shame. If you look at all the genocides that happen around the world, if you look at the Armenian genocide, where the Ottomans had, murdered over 1 million Armenians, during World War I. If you look at the Circassian genocide, where the Russians had, murdered over 1 million Circassians in the 1860s. If you look at the Holodomor, where the Soviets and the Russians had basically, Stalin had murdered, over 1 million, a few million Ukrainians, just his, terrible policies. A lot of people ended up starving. If you look at this, like, the Ottoman government, the Turkish government, sorry. The Turkish government denies the Armenian genocide today. The Turkish government does not recognize it. The Russian government does not recognize the Circassian genocide. And the Russian government actually does not recognize the Holodomor as genocide either. And also Ukraine. The Ukrainian government today, some parts of the Ukrainian government have tried to make some progress of Poland, but there are still officials in the Ukrainian government that actually deny the Volyn massacre. For people that don't know what the Volyn massacre is, that is in 1943 and 1944, and basically that is where Ukrainian ultra-nationalists went into Polish villages and just completely mass murdered, murdered the entire village. You're talking women, kids, over 250,000 Polish people died. And there are officials in the Ukrainian government today that actually deny that atrocity. And not only did they deny that atrocity, they have statues dedicated to the people who actually were responsible for that, like Stefan Bandera. Stefan Bandera is one of the people who was leading the UPA, the Ukrainian Insurgent Army, who was responsible for that. And when we're talking about Russia, Russia is the same. Russia has statues dedicated to Stalin, and also statues dedicated to people who were involved in the Holodomor and, killing millions of Ukrainians. And there's probably statues dedicated to the Russian Imperials that were involved in the Circassian genocide. And in Turkey, in Turkey there are statues dedicated to these Ottoman generals that were also involved in these atrocities. And if you look at Japan, Japan also denies, the Japanese government also denies a lot of their history, and there's also statues dedicated to these to a lot of these generals that are committed horrible atrocities, absolutely horrible atrocities. I'm trying to think of other countries that also deny genocides. There's Japan, there's Turkey, there's Russia, there is Ukraine, there is Serbia. Serbia denies atrocity. Parts of the Serbian government deny the Bosnian genocide, where during the Yugoslavian wars, during the Bosnian War, Serbian soldiers had, basically targeted and murdered thousands of Bosnian Muslims. And then there's also parts of the Croatian government that also deny what the Ustasha did during World War II, which was they were a Croatian fascist organization that was aligned with Nazi Germany, and they had, killed, thousands of Serbs, brutally also. So there's, Serbian parts of the Serbian government, Croatian government, Russian government, Turkish government, Ukrainian government, and Chinese government denies the, the Great Leap Forward, and also what happened at Tiananmen Square. The reason these governments and these people deny genocide, the reason they deny these genocides and they make excuses for it, is because pride and shame. It's because they love their country so much, and they don't want to portray their country in a bad light whatsoever. For them, their country is the best country in the world. There is no other country that's better. Their country is the absolute best in the world. And for them, in their ideology, they cannot seem to accept that their country had done, horrible things, that their country had committed such horrible atrocities. And so these governments, engage in basically the denial of these genocides. And also in my own country, America, my own country is not spared from this. My own country, America, you have people that also deny the atrocities that the Confederacy had committed during the Civil War. There are thousands of people in America that basically have this false view, and they think that the Confederacy was like a force for good during the American Civil War, and they think that the Confederacy has done, they think the Confederacy was not primarily about slavery. They think that it was primarily about states' rights, and so they basically try to hide as much of the slavery as possible. They don't want to talk about it. They act like it wasn't the main reason, when slavery was in fact the main reason why the Confederacy seceded. If you just look at the Confederate Constitution and you look at the Constitution of all of these other states that were in the Confederacy, they outline that the reason they are seceding is primarily for slavery. It was primarily for slavery, but unfortunately, you have people that still believe this false history, that it had nothing to do with slavery, and they think that it was all about states' rights. But guess what? The state of West Virginia actually seceded from Virginia. And that state did not want to be part of the Confederacy. What did the Confederacy do? No other Confederate state recognized that secession, and they invaded West Virginia. So what about West Virginia states' rights? And what happened is the Confederacy even had a law where if you owned 20 or more slaves, that you were not subject to the Confederate draft. So there are these people that will deny these horrible atrocities. They will deny these genocides, and it's primarily because it's their people who did it. If you look at the people who defend the Confederacy, a lot of times it is Southerners also too. And I'm not attacking Southerners today. There's nothing wrong with being proud of being a Southerner. I love Texas, for example. If I had to choose, I would rather live in Texas than live in New York. Texas, has less traffic, more affordable property, lower taxes. But you could be proud of being from the South. You could be proud of being of a place from Texas, but you shouldn't be proud of something like the Confederacy, because the Confederacy was definitely not a force for good, and it's also a stain on the South's history. It is, it's a very, it's a very bad time. So it was people don't want to admit that it was their people that did it, and where do people learn these conspiracies, these denials? Where do they learn it from? A lot of times, they learn it from the people that raised them, even their parents. So it'll basically, like in America, is you will have some Southern parents that might teach their kids, and they'll tell their kids, the Confederacy was about states' rights, it wasn't about slavery, and so the kids end up believing that. They grow up believing that, and then they teach their kids the same thing. And it's the same thing in Turkey. In Turkey, parents will teach their kids, our empire did not kill any Armenians, it's all just propaganda, and they'll believe that. They'll teach their kids. Same thing in Russia about the Holodomor, teaching their kids, and the same thing in Ukraine, teaching them about the Volyn genocide. And the same thing in Serbia, and the same thing in Croatia. So, and the same thing in Japan. And also in Britain too. Britain, the exact same thing too. Britain, France, and where a lot of these empires happen. There are people in the British government that also deny like the atrocities that they committed against India, for example. So literally, it comes from people brainwashing their kids, teaching their kids that their country is the best country in the world, and they don't want to admit in their eyes they cannot admit that their country had committed something so horrible. They cannot admit that their country had done something so bad, and that's basically where genocide denial comes from. It comes from people who have so much pride, and that they cannot, and because they're so ashamed, they cannot admit that their country had done something so horrible, and so they create these false conspiracy theories. They brainwash people into them that their country's never done something bad. But here's the thing, is if you like history a lot, one of the most important things about history is that learning history and acknowledging history. And you have to acknowledge the good and the bad things in history. You have to teach both. You have to teach the good things that happened, and also you have to teach the really bad things and the really evil things from history. Because if you do not teach history, and you don't teach the bad things that happened, and you don't teach people, like, this is what your country did. Your country did horrible things. And we have to, admit to it. The people alive today are not responsible for these genocides that happened. But they have to admit that it was their country that did this in the past. They can't deny that, because if you deny these genocides, you deny these atrocities, you can never move forward together as a people, and it's just going to cause endless conflict, and it's also going to cause endless suffering to the people who are still alive from those genocides. Can you imagine how horrible like a Holocaust victim hears when you have people saying that the Holocaust did not happen? Can you imagine how horrible they must feel, listening to something like that? So it's about showing respect to the victims, acknowledging the bad things that happened in history, and teaching like a new generation of people so that history does not repeat itself. Because if you don't teach history and you don't teach people that these horrible things that happened, you are basically doomed to repeat history again. That's when people know their country had done such horrible things, they know their country had committed genocide, they're much less likely to do something like that in the future. But if you have an ignorant population that is unaware fully of what their country and their people have done in their past, and they make excuses for these genocides, and they even attack the victims, they blame the victims for these genocides, then those countries are possibly even doomed to repeat that history again and do the same atrocity or possibly even worse. That's why it's important to acknowledge genocides. But unfortunately, all across the world is you have people that are they are so brainwashed into this, and they're really toxic. And some of these people, like I said, some of these people that deny these genocides, some of these people, you can get them to change their views. You can convince them when they're still young. You show them the light. But some other people, they're no matter what you try, they're not going to change their view. And some of these really toxic people, they have to admit what their countries did. Because if you don't admit the bad things that your country did, do you truly love your country if you're not willing to even admit the bad things that your country did? You know, somebody who truly loves their country, a true patriot, is even going to take responsibility for the horrible things that their country has done. And so if you don't teach it, if you don't acknowledge the horrible things that your country has done, then you are possibly doomed to repeat it again. But unfortunately, we have so many people these days that don't care about stuff like this, and they would rather be, on Twitter, they would rather be on Facebook, they'd rather be on their smartphones than, learn about history and learn about, what, these men and women had basically gone through in, time periods like this during World War II, the heroic sacrifices that people had made. You instead have, kids these days that, will rather, see celebrities as, their heroes instead of World War II veterans. For me, when I was a kid growing up, World War II veterans were literally gods to us. They were our biggest heroes. We loved World War II veterans when we were growing up as kids. But now these days, the kids just love the celebrities more than the World War II veterans, and there's not that many World War II veterans around. So I'll wrap up this video here. I know I'm talking a lot of history. If you ever see a World War II veteran, you don't know everything that they had gone through. If you ever see a World War II veteran, remember, there's not that many alive, and every year we're losing more and more of them, and eventually we're going to lose all of them. If you ever see a World War II veteran, take a moment to talk to them, and make sure you thank them for their service, because I'm sure that it will mean a lot to them. So thank you to all the, soldiers who had fought in World War II, fought for their countries, and had, helped to defeat, fascism and Imperial Japan, and helped, to free the world. Thank you for that, because if they didn't win, we would be living in a very, very, very bad world today. Very, very bad. If Germany and Japan won World War II, we would be living in a very, very bad time. So always keep that in mind. So if you ever see a World War II veteran, make sure to thank them for their service and what they had gone through. So thank you guys for watching. I hope that you guys enjoyed this series. If you did, do drop a like. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care, everyone. Have a wonderful day, guys.